and we begin the program in Russia, where it's been reported that 11 people suspected of involvement in a brutal attack on one of Moscow's largest music halls has been arrested, including 4 of the assailants. This is according to Russia's FSB security service.
What led Putin to reject a terror alert that could have been prevented? Down the history, there exists a horrific warning that went ignored and the calamity that occurred. This incident puts light on the pivotal moments which poised on the brink of altering the course of events forever. Let's get going. A violent attack occurred at a rock concert at Crocus City Hall in Moscow, causing a fire and partial roof collapse. The assault was carried out by armed individuals who managed to escape. The incident, which resulted in numerous casualties, has been claimed by the Islamic State, according to SITE. An organization that monitors jihadist activities claims that it has not been independently verified. Terrorist attacks often aim to incite a strong, repressive response from authorities, leading to an escalation in violence. If this was part of the Islamic State's strategy for the Moscow attack, they are likely to achieve their goal. The suspects in the attack have reportedly been subjected to severe interrogation by Russian authorities. Videos circulating online suggest that the suspects were tortured, with one video appearing to show security forces mutilating a suspect. The Russian Investigative Committee has warned that the death toll could rise, making it the deadliest terrorist incident in Moscow since the 2002 Nord-Ost theater hostage crisis. In that event, over 170 people lost their lives, including the attackers, during a failed rescue attempt. In a meeting with senior officers of the Federal Security Service, President Putin criticized Western officials for their provocative statements, warning of a potential terrorist attack in Moscow. He described these warnings as attempts to intimidate and destabilize Russian society. Earlier in the month, the U.S. Embassy in Moscow had issued a public warning about extremists planning to target large gatherings in the city, including concerts. While the U.S. did not explicitly link this warning to the recent attack, National Security Council spokesperson Adrian Watson stated that the U.S. government had information about a planned terrorist attack in Moscow and had shared this information with Russian authorities. Following Putin's 5th presidential win with a staggering 87% of the vote, an attack took place. This led to a nationwide increase in security measures and the cancellation of public events. Interestingly, the FSB reported preventing an attack on a Moscow synagogue by an Afghan branch of the Islamic State. Doesn't this remind you of earlier times in Putin's rule? Those times were marked by suicide bombings, often attributed to Islamists from Russia and its neighboring regions. These incidents have disrupted the sense of security that Putin has been trying to build in Moscow, especially since the Ukraine invasion. Have you noticed how Islamist groups have targeted Russia in the past? They often cite what they see as the Kremlin's anti-Muslim policies. Remember the 2004 Beslan school siege that resulted in over 380 deaths? Or the suicide bombings in Moscow's subway stations in 2010 and St. Petersburg subway in 2017? These attacks serve as stark reminders of the threats Russia has faced. What are your thoughts on these incidents and their impact on Russia's security measures? Do you think these measures have been effective in preventing such attacks? U.S. President Joe Biden has been kept informed about the situation, despite suggestions from some Russian state media commentators that Ukraine may be involved. There is no evidence to support this claim. Ukraine has denied any involvement, accusing the Kremlin of staging a false flag operation. Thad Troy, a former CIA Russia specialist, stated that the U.S. Embassy's warning in early March indicated intelligence about some sort of planning. He expressed doubt that the incident was a false flag operation, arguing that Putin, who is secure in his position, would not need to resort to such tactics. Despite the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, Moscow has remained relatively unscathed. Putin's spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov, initially referred to the situation as a state of war, but later retracted his statement. Concerns have been raised about the safety of Ukraine's nuclear facilities due to missile attacks. Charles Litchfield of the Atlantic Council's Geoeconomic Center in Washington suggests that the Kremlin may use the war in Ukraine to justify the recent increase in drone and ballistic attacks. In recent weeks, Moscow has intensified its missile attacks on Ukrainian cities and infrastructure, resulting in civilian casualties. On Friday, it launched its largest missile and drone attack on Ukraine this year. Meanwhile, Ukraine has been conducting strikes within Russia, targeting factories and oil refineries with drones. These attacks have been carried out by troops who are struggling on the battlefield due to delays in receiving crucial aid from the US and other allies. Additionally, raids have been staged in border regions. Despite these challenges, Moscow remains largely insulated from the direct effects of the conflict. In court, the suspects appeared battered and bruised. One suspect was brought to court directly from the hospital in a wheelchair, attended by medical personnel, and displayed multiple injuries. President Putin has pledged to punish those responsible for the barbaric terrorist attack, which could result in increased repression of Muslim minorities in Russia. In Putin's only public comments on the massacre, he did not acknowledge the Islamic State's claim of responsibility. Despite the Islamic State claiming the attack and releasing footage to support their claims, Russia has attempted to attribute some blame to Ukraine. Putin alleged, without providing evidence, that the 4 arrested gunmen intended to escape to Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has countered that Putin and his associates are trying to deflect blame from failures in Russian intelligence. The US has stated that it received intelligence indicating that the Islamic State Khorasan province acted independently. As for the question of whether the death toll will rise, emergency workers were still searching for potential victims in the severely damaged concert hall as of the Monday following the attack. The death toll increased several times over the weekend as more bodies were discovered. Many families were left in uncertainty about whether their relatives who were at the concert hall on Friday night were still alive. Igor Pogadayev told the Associated Press that he was desperately searching for any information about his wife, who attended the concert and then stopped responding to his messages. Pogadayev said he searched hospitals in Moscow and the surrounding region for information on newly admitted patients, but his wife was not among those reported injured or on the list of identified victims. On Sunday, Moscow's health department announced that it had begun using DNA testing to identify the bodies of those killed, a process that is expected to take at least 2 weeks. In Russia, President Putin and his team are blaming Ukraine for their shortcomings. The question on everyone's mind is how Russia's extensive intelligence and law enforcement network failed to prevent one of the country's largest terrorist attacks during Putin's nearly 25-year reign, despite ample warnings. The full story is still murky. US and European officials, along with security and counterterrorism experts, stress that disrupting covert international terror plots is challenging, even under ideal conditions with specific information and efficient security services. The failure likely stems from a mix of factors, with deep-seated distrust within the Russian security establishment, and its relations with other global intelligence agencies being key among them. Critics also highlight Putin's manipulation of his domestic security apparatus for an ever-growing political crackdown domestically. His focus on waging a campaign against Ukraine and the West likely served as a distraction. This narrative of Russia's inability to hinder the concert attack is based on interviews with US and European security officials, security experts, and analysts specializing in international intelligence capabilities. Many chose to remain anonymous due to the sensitive nature of the intelligence details. Andrei Soldatov, a Russian intelligence expert, emphasized that to prevent terrorist attacks, a robust and efficient system of intelligence sharing and gathering is needed. Trust within the agency and with other countries' agencies, as well as good coordination, are crucial. He pointed out that these are areas where issues arise. On March 7th, following a private warning from the CIA, Russia's Federal Security Service disrupted an ISIS-K plot and heightened security measures. This led many, including US officials, to believe that Russian authorities were taking action. Notably, security at the Crocus City Hall, a concert venue, was increased. Staff were warned of a potential terrorist attack and given instructions on how to respond. Alexander Bortnikov, the director of the FSB, stated that the US information was general, but that they had reacted and taken appropriate measures. However, due to the strained relationship between the US and Russia, US officials were cautious about sharing information beyond what was necessary. The US Embassy issued a public warning on March 7th, stating that the risk of an attack on a concert venue in Moscow was high for the next 48 hours. It's possible that Russian authorities were vigilant during this period, but became more complacent and skeptical when an attack did not occur. It's unclear whether this was due to a mistake in US intelligence or a delay in the extremists' plan due to the increased security. These reports, which reached the Russian National Security Council, highlighted the involvement of Tajiks in recent disrupted plots in Europe and attacks in Iran and Istanbul. However, they did not mention the Western warnings or a potential attack in Moscow. By this time, skepticism about the plot had grown within the Russian government. Mr. Putin felt comfortable enough to dismiss the public warnings in a speech to top FSB officers, using the opportunity to once again criticize the West. As Andrea Kendall noted, any information that doesn't fit into the FSB and Putin's worldview, that the US is out to get Russia, is easily dismissed. But what will be the consequences of Putin's decision? Will there be more devastating repercussions? Share your thoughts and views about this in the comments below. If this story has captured your attention, please show your support. Share to spread awareness and subscribe for more content.